Gambling is once again a headline story in Major League sports as the firing of umpire Pat Hoberg has been held up. Is this another one-off, or is this a scary trend that Major League sports leagues have to really be scared of? And the Super Bowl is coming up, and who better to have on to give us a preview than former scout and CFL champion Russ Landy? That and more coming up on Sports Talk with Dad right now. Welcome back to another amazing episode of Sports Talk with Dad. As always, my name is Kyle, and I cannot call this Sports Talk with Dad without the man sitting next to me, a man so old, he seems to forget that the Packers didn't win 3 Super Bowls in a row. My dad, Tim.
They won 3 championships in a row. It would have won 3 Super Bowls, but they didn't have the Super Bowls yet.
Which means they did not win 3 Super Bowls.
The Chiefs are not the first team to win 3 championships in a row. The Packers did it. Matter of fact,
the Chiefs haven't won yet.
I hope they don't, because I'm tired of this argument.
But Packers won 2 in a row.
They won 3 championships in a row.
And the Browns won 5 AFL championships in a row.
Doesn't count. Doesn't really count.
That doesn't count.
Yeah, that league was matter. Of course, they won when they came into the NFL, but that's another story. No, seriously, I get what Mahomes is doing is going to be, if they win, it's going to be something we've never seen before.
Yeah.
I get that.
Do you?
But I
I
don't.
want to make sure.
I always want to remind people the NFL's got a history, and there were great teams before then. And the Packers were one of those, and they won 3 in a row. They would have won if they would have played an AFL team back then, they would have destroyed them. That was probably the best team of the 3 championships in a row.
Yes, of course. I mean, you go back through the 60s, but the Super Bowl didn't exist. I mean, it was definitely a dynasty, and it shouldn't be taken away. The NFL's weird that way because it really is this is everything before, right, and it kind of is just what it is. And then there's the Super Bowl era, and that's real football.
I had a short that came up, or a memory that came up this week. My favorite Super Bowl memory. I think this should be a special award. Best played game with a hangover.
Oh, jeez.
Max McGee was on talking about that. He gets in at 5 o'clock. Bart Starr's going down to get a newspaper. Max McGee is just walking in with Horning. Hungover as hungover can be. He looks at Boyd Dollar and says, "Do not get hurt. I can't play today." And, of course, in the first couple plays, he gets his shoulder separated. McGee has to go in.
It wasn't even the first couple plays, don't forget. It was warm-ups when he got hurt.
That's right. McGee has to go in and has the game of his life. Probably should have been the MVP of that first Super Bowl.
Should have been. I honestly think it's a travesty that he wasn't.
I mean, with that might have tainted the MVP considering how hungover he was.
Well, and it was the quarterback star of the league. The NFL did something smart because they're like, the quarterbacks are the star. This is the guy who's the face of the NFL right now in Bart Starr. Didn't mean to do the star thing, but that was
well done.
That was well done. Pat on the back there. But Max McGee was the MVP of that game.
And Bart Starr, to his credit, got a Corvette for winning the MVP. And he used that to start the
ranch.
The boys' ranch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's still going on today. Helps a lot of kids who went down a bad path.
Yeah.
They teach them how to work on cars and do different things. Rawhide Boys Camp is what it's called. So good. And Bart Starr was that kind of a guy. He was just one of the best guys that has ever been in the league.
Well, fun fact, that boys' ranch is always hoping the Packers do get sold. Because I don't think a lot of people know this.
That's the Boys and Girls Club.
Oh, the Boys and Girls Club of Green Bay that gets the money. Sorry, not the ranch. I was mistaken, but you taught me this. I didn't know this. The Boys and Girls Club, if the Packers are ever sold, all proceeds go to the Boys and Girls Club in perpetuity.
Right.
Green Bay gets all of that from the team forever. I don't remember exactly what it is, but they get a percentage of teams' profits moving forward if the Packers ever leave Green Bay, because the Boys and Girls Club stepped up in a big, big way to keep the Packers in Green Bay when they sold stock.
Right. And that would be a very wealthy Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, so they'll be very happy if the Packers move.
They will never move.
They will never move. It would be, I don't even know how that would work. That's one thing I want to get on this show. I want to find somebody that actually knows the math behind it to figure out what would have to happen. Because I know I don't get paid. I own stock, but it means nothing, and I completely understand that.
The team is worth what? When you consider Lambeau Field and the Hall of Fame and everything.
Well, they don't own Lambeau Field.
I know they don't, but I'm just trying to add it in the net value of the team and everything else.
$3 billion team.
Probably 5.
Maybe.
Probably
Dallas
5,
is worth 8. and that comes with everything.
To buy the Packers, it'd take $5 billion.
I don't know if it would take
ever
that much.
It's never going to be sold, so we don't even need to talk about it.
No, we don't. But if you look at the Bears, they don't own the stadium. They're probably going to be sold for around $4.5-5 billion when it's all said and done.
I think they'll end up selling it for 6 or 7 before it's done. I really do.
Yeah, probably. But again, you don't own the stadium. That's the sticking point because you don't have that
yet.
And that's where it comes into play where Arlington is a big factor in this because I don't think Chicago's going to fork up for the stadium
because it's going to be a $5 billion stadium
when it's all said and done.
Yeah,
it's going to be a nightmare. Not a nightmare the Rays are facing, but we're going to save that conversation for later on in our baseball conversations after the Super Bowl. So that's gotten interesting.
Very interesting, and you know we love the Rays. I want to talk about it, but we're going to talk about something else with the MLB. Pat Holberg fought really hard to not be fired by Major League Baseball as the umpire, and he has been.
Yeah, and deservedly so.
He should have been suspended. He's eligible to be rehired next season in 26.
Yep.
And I think they should rehire him because there's no evidence that he ever bet.
Here's the thing. So for those of you that don't know, Pat Holberg, I keep wanting to say Hoiberg.
No, it's
Holberg.
It's
Holberg. So I apologize. He had shared account with a friend of his who's a very big poker player. And what had happened is his friend,
quote unquote,
was placing bets on it, and he was too. Like they've proven now, he was also playing bets, not on baseball, but on golf and football. He was gambling
during the offseason.
However, that account did place bets on 8 games he was involved in, including Game 4 of the 2021 World Series. Information's going to get shared. There's nothing you can do about that. Right. He's your friend. You're going to share information. And so he was fired for that reason. And honestly, rightfully so. This is the dumbest thing you could have ever done. Why would you have a shared account with somebody for a gambling site? And if you're involved in sports at all, why would you have an app on your phone and be gambling on sports?
And why would you be sharing that phone with your friend? I just don't get it.
He says he shared the phone. Nobody shares their phone.
You know what the worst part about this is? Pat Holberg was probably the single best ball and strike umpire in the entire major leagues.
Yeah.
You can't afford to lose good umpires. But they did the right thing. I wish they would have suspended him for a year.
They basically just did.
Well, he has to. Will he be rehired?
I don't know, because he, like you said, here's the hard thing, is not only balls and strikes. He's one of the best umpires in baseball.
Yes.
I mean, he is a great umpire, and there's nothing that shows he favored any team or called any different things. The MLB looked through that through and through, independent and internally. There's no proof that he did anything with the game.
It's a shoeless Joe Jackson thing, who had a great World Series.
He got paid.
He
didn't know what it was for.
Right.
He hit 345 in the World Series. I mean, honestly, I think to this day it's the greatest World Series by a single player in the history of the game. But again,
he's been
accepted money.
Yes. And Holberg's friend bet on games he was involved in.
He did. Well, quote unquote, his friend. Again, it's his account, and they checked his device, and it shows his device didn't do it. But it's like with Floyd Mayweather before the what was the fight? Conor McGregor fight.
Conor McGregor.
Yeah, he didn't place the bet, but his friend sure went and placed the bet for there to be a knockout in the 7th round, and that's what happened.
Can I call hypocrite though? On Major League, not the Major League Baseball would ever be a hypocrite, but Shohei Ohtani, they had the broom to sweep everything under the rug real quickly because he was the biggest star in baseball. Right. His assistant, his translator was placing the bets. MLB just didn't want to look into it.
Well, it's also was proven at that point that it was theft from his accounts. Now, it could have been a cover. It could have been a cover. But if you look at the evidence, it was all there that Shohei didn't know anything about it. Shohei didn't know anything about it.
Right.
I understand. This, you can't cover this up. And this is a bigger issue than a player. This is why Pete Rose is a bigger issue and should never make it into the Hall of Fame. Not because of what I have a hard time because I think he as a player, you could put him in the Hall of Fame, but as a manager, he was making the bets, which makes it a lot worse.
He doesn't belong in there as a player. His records are represented in the Hall of Fame.
And I've tilted towards you on this more with the more gambling stuff that's coming out because it's ruining the integrity of the game.
You should never have a plaque on the wall because the second that you place a bet on a game, win, lose, or draw, 1,000 different things could happen, especially as a manager. You can leave a pitcher in too long.
Right.
You can give him a rest if you got big money on it. If you're a reliever, I'm going to yank you before the big guy comes up. I can move a shift. I can do 1,000 different things to affect the game.
Right.
And Pete did.
Yeah, he definitely did. There's no doubt about it.
He had an addiction.
And that's what I'm saying. It's worse from this perspective, especially with an umpire being involved, because you have full control over that game. It's not a single player making a difference. It is an entire game. Parlays need to be banned. I'm a big believer in that, because it also could go into play where you bet on a parlay for a player, and all of a sudden you don't want him to hit a home run that game or hit how many hits he's going to have in that game, and so you're calling balls and strikes. Again, no proof Holberg did that. I'm not saying this individual, but when it comes to umpires, you have to set an example here, because that could happen.
It could, and it would happen with some guys. Did Holberg do it? Probably not.
All evidence, again, shows he didn't.
He called a clean game, but was there a pitch that was borderline that he called a ball instead of a strike, or a strike instead of a ball? You'll never know, because it's a fraction of an inch.
Right.
And it could affect the entire game. Griffey Jr. had been retired. He wasn't in the World Series. But imagine he was up and a pitch was just a little bit outside. Griffey's eye is perfect. Or if,
Barry Bonds
was up, or let's see, pick a pitcher.
Randy Johnson. Greg Maddux.
Greg Maddux, that's a perfect example. Craig Maddux is pitching. You're going to call one of his where he's painted the black, and you're going to call it a ball when it was really a strike?
And that's why I don't think you can rehire him. I really don't. If I'm Major League Baseball, this is my stance. And I feel bad for a guy who, again, is a great umpire.
Outstanding. But
you have to be the example now. It's done.
You
can't bring him back.
Actually, you're right. He's the Pete Rose of umpires.
Yeah.
You've got to make the example, because this cannot ever be allowed to happen. It's teetering on the brink right now. I want to ask Russ about it when he comes on, because he's been in the sports.
Well, and that's the question, too, is this isn't just an example for Major League Baseball. This is an example for all sports, because you look at NFL referees, right? We already know that they're manipulating games for the NFL.
Stop.
That's why the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl. I don't know how you can disagree with me anymore on this.
I can.
But in the NFL, you have a situation where these are not full-time employees. They are working outside of the NFL. And especially you look at who was the big buff guy back in the day. His son's in it now.
Ed.
That guy.
Yeah.
He's an attorney, right?
Right.
We don't know who his clients are, nor should we know. This is his own private business. But we don't know what's going on. And again, I'm not saying Ed Hockley is who it was.
Yes,
and his son's in now. And I don't think Ed Hockley would do that. I think he's full of integrity, and I want to make that very clear. I'm just saying, for an example, there's other refs out there. We don't know their financial situations. We don't know what's going on. It can lead to bad things happening. And with gambling the way it is now on a smartphone, it's so easy to do. And the behind-the-scenes stuff, we talked about it last week when it comes to college players.
Mm-hmm.
Guys in financial straits, I can make a couple extra million. And college players is even scarier, because these are 18, 19-year-old kids.
Yes.
Right? They don't understand all of that. And I'm sure they're smart kids, but I know me at 18, 19 years old. I've known other 18, 19-year-olds, and they don't think that way from a worldly perspective.
It's the definition of bad decision time.
Correct. Wisdom comes with experience, right? And they don't have that experience. And all of a sudden, people are throwing money at them. They have families that want to see that money, and bad decisions can be made. You have to keep him out of the game. You cannot rehire him.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens next year. My gut is he never umpires another game in the major leagues.
No, you can't. And he loses all of his benefits because of this.
He loses everything.
He loses all of his life work. He's going to have to find something else to do, because he won't be able to I don't even think I allow him to umpire college games.
No. Most he could do would be to coach umpiring at one of the camps.
I wouldn't even want him coaching. Honestly, if I'm Major League Baseball and you go to his camp, again, this is an example thing. Nobody had any contact with Pete Rose, because he was done with baseball. It was over. He was signing autographs. There were no Pete Rose camps anybody went to. There were no
I
hitting
know,
instructions
because he was
from
banned.
Pete Rose
Well,
because he was banned from baseball.
and Pat has got to be banned from baseball
He's
right
got
now.
to be right now. He's fired. He's not banned. You have to make an example, and I feel terrible saying this because again, great umpire,
Mhm.
but you have to make an example out of this guy and really make sure he's not a part of
And-
baseball ever again.
And you know why I feel really bad? People have no idea what these umpires have to go through to get to the major
Correct.
league. They're in the minor leagues and they're treated worse and paid less than the players are
Correct.
at low levels. I mean, they have to find their own hotels. They have to go and find transportation. It's a
Correct.
miserable life.
This guy
They
worked
do it because I love it.
This guy worked his whole life to get here.
Right.
He sacrificed all of his life to get here. I mean, I'm sure there were birthday parties and stuff he had to miss to be a part of Major League Baseball. But you knew what you were doing. You knew the implications of this. And if you didn't know that and you didn't think about that,
Well, he was too stupid.
that's on you.
Then he was too stupid to be in the MLB.
Right. This has to be a situation where you ban this guy from baseball, make him the example for all the umpires that are coming up.
If I was to live life over, I think I would have went the route of the umpire.
Yeah.
And tried to make it. I know my older brother, Mark, that was his thing. I mean, his life took a different path. He was a father real young, but he said if I had to do it over again, I would have went to the camps and I would have tried to be an MLB umpire. And he would have been a good one.
It's a grind, man. Again, I feel bad saying it, but this is what Major League Baseball has to do. But we do have a guest ready to come on. We have now CFL champion, former NFL scout, and one of the greatest people I think I've ever known, Russ Landy. All right, Russ. So we had a conversation before you hopped on, a lot about gambling. MLB umpire Hoberg, right? That's how you pronounce his name, was just fired or upheld on the firing because he shared an account with somebody who had bet on baseball. And we're starting to see that more and more. Basketball, they're now going after Rozier for possibly messing with parlays and being involved in that. And you're starting to see in the NFL a lot more suspensions. Now, this is a huge news story now. You have been in the NFL for a very long time. Has this always been a conversation and we're just starting to see it, or is this something new we're dealing with now?
Well, I think you're seeing it more publicly now because, like, when I signed, both when I worked for the Rams and the Browns, you had to sign your contract, and an addendum was you will not gamble.
Really?
Yeah, you can't gamble, and I don't remember the verbiage of it, but there was a bunch of other stuff that you couldn't do. And from what I've been told, there are still similar things signed by employees of the NFL. I'm sure the refs in the NFL signed an agreement that strictly forbids not just gambling on the NFL, but a myriad of things that you are not allowed to gamble on. So I get that it's bigger now because it's in the public eye, but I don't think it's ever going to be an issue in the NFL. I really don't. They are very on top of this. They take it very seriously. They are not going to budge an inch and allow gambling to make its way into the league in a bad way.
Well, and here's what makes me nervous is that not only is it more in the public eye, but it's easier to gamble now. I don't even know how many states legalize gambling from a cell phone, from a push of a button. It's a new wave coming through, and especially with parlays, specifically with players. We've already seen some suspensions in the NFL. What more do you think the NFL can do specifically to make sure this doesn't get in and ruin their shield, so to speak?
Well, I think the biggest thing they should do, and it shouldn't be very hard considering the number of NFL owners or executives either own or affiliated with Premier League teams. Gambling has been in England for years and ages, and they have figured out how to keep it out of ruining their game because everything is tied in. All bets pretty much legally made in the UK or through the on Premier League games, they get the data. So they know when there are weird swings and stuff like that. I would be stunned if the NFL doesn't have that now or does not get that in the future to where any changes or weird things happening gambling wise don't show up in the NFL's lap.
All right. Well, now that we've settled the gambling, they got that under control. Now, gambling may not be the issue, but obviously the NFL was hoping for another Taylor Swift Super Bowl. And I don't blame them. The ratings were huge last year, absolutely huge. But there have been questionable calls all year
Hold
when
on.
it has come to the Chiefs. And
Just hold on.
this AFC Championship
Stop it.
game was ridiculous.
I'm jumping in because I've been defending the NFL all season. You're ridiculous. The only thing I will say about the game against the Bills, the marks for first downs, several times during the game, they got marks that were a yard behind where on TV it looked where the ball is. And maybe it was just our angle because TV distorts things. But it looked like they were constantly marking the Bills back a yard.
I mean, that's our big complaint. Okay, I can think of 2 calls that were worse, but
Stop it.
I will digress.
Let Russ answer.
Well, I mean, there's a whole lot of things. First, remember, and this is other sports do this too, but the reps are graded. Each individual official that's on the field is graded every game by the league. And as the playoffs come, the best of each official, each spot on the field is allowed to work the playoffs based on how they performed statistically during the season. So that's why the groups in the playoffs often don't work as well together. The communication's a little bit of a problem because they haven't worked all season together to work out the bugs. I think everybody believes there's a bias. They always do. That's always how it's been. I always thought that with the Broncos when they played my Chargers because John Elway would pull rabbits out of a hat every week. I think the reality is twofold. Firstly, certain coaches have a real sort of, I don't know what the word would be, almost OCD thing about we are going to make sure not only that we practice it to make sure we don't get penalties, but there are certain teams that put a lot of emphasis on studying the analytics of officials, understanding what penalties they call, which ones they don't, and not just what penalties, but where do they call it? I mean, I spoke to somebody that works for a team in the NFL that's no longer playing. He said they get it down to the nitty gritty of they know if they're calling false starts, they know if it's more on the left side, the right side, tackle, guard. They have all this data that they're able to identify to understand, hey, here's where the stuff is happening. We're going against this group of refs or this like official at this spot, and he calls this the most on DBs. So the week leading up to that, there's a stress point. Hey, this guy is going to be watching for this. This group calls this types of penalties. Andy and his staff there with the Chiefs, Coach Reed, they are meticulous with everything. I am sure they are on top of every little thing. Not to say the Bills aren't, but just a different approach. And let's also remember, this is a game that is worth how many billions? And they literally take 2 wood sticks and a chain, and that's how they're figuring out first downs. I mean, if we can send people to the moon, which we did 50 years ago, and we can have SpaceX launching unmanned rockets, I think we can figure out how to do the first down without having
you
2 guys in a chain.
You think they'd be able to figure out how to tell when a catch is not a catch, but I know you have a question here.
That was my question. The only call that I thought was really
Weird.
egregious, taking out the first down that wasn't. But how did they rule that a catch for Kansas City down at the 5-yard line?
It was very strange. My guess, at least they explained it, and I asked a few guys in the NFL, not official people, not like referee people, but just people that work in the league. Everybody said the same thing, which is, yes, it hit the ground, but they believe the call was upheld because he had the ball against his chest, and even when it hit the ground, it didn't move, and they felt that was qualified as a catch.
The
I'm not
Bills
saying
guy had it against his chest.
when they landed, yes, but remember, a tie always goes to the receiver. So if they're battling for the ball, they have to wait until one of the two gets it.
Listen, I'm a conspiracy theorist through and through, and so I'm going to believe what I want to believe, and that's how it's going to be.
That's fair. I mean, hey, I'm sure you plan on watching like the Packers played the Broncos this weekend in the Super Bowl. But those of us that aren't conspiracy theorists, we're ready to watch a real football game.
We will, and I will never watch the game when the Packers played the Broncos because they should have won that game. But
yeah, your coach saying he's leaving the team right before the Super Bowl doesn't help that situation. And no matter how mad I was, that John Elway play of him flipping in the air is one of the greatest in NFL history.
It is a great play. There's no doubt.
It was.
All right, so on to the Super Bowl here because it has been set. We have the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Kansas City Chiefs. It's going to be run versus pass all day here. What are you thinking we're going to expect in this game?
I mean, I don't think it's going to be a low scoring affair. I think you're going to see a lot of similarities to not this year, but a year ago when the Chiefs played the Ravens. And they basically stepped up in the playoffs and said, we're not allowing the Ravens to run. We are going to force them to throw the ball over our squeezed in defense to beat us. And I think that's now, obviously, I don't know their game plan or anything like that, but I would assume they're going to do a similar thing to Philadelphia. Philly's O line is unbelievable. I think they're going to crowd that box, squeeze it as tight as they can, hope that Chris Jones plays the best game of the season that he's had all year. And if they can shut down the run, I think they feel confident that they'll be able to win this game.
What do the Eagles have to do? Because I've seen this all season long. Kelsey goes into the middle of the seam and is just always there as a safety valve for Mahomes. What do the Eagles have to do to shut that down, or what does anybody have to do to shut it down?
Well, it's really hard for a few reasons. Firstly, because the relationship with Mahomes and Kelsey that they've developed over the years enables them to go off script without even having to make a check or a call. In that Kelsey knows when he begins his route, if he sees something or if the play just takes longer, he knows where Mahomes is going to want him to go. Additionally, Kelsey, for he may no longer be one of the top 3 or 4 athletes at the position, but mentally he is elite at this point in his career in terms of understanding positioning. So if you're going to slow him down, I think there's a physicality at the point of attack to slow that release, to throw up the timing. And you have to just say, we know he's not a 4-4 guy. We are going to force the ball to go over us, play under him, play in front of him so those quick little dumps aren't there. That to me would be my thing. I'd be man physical at the line. I'd want that guy covering him, but I'd want him between Pat and Kelsey and force the deep safety to have to make the tackle if they can put it over me.
Okay, you said if you're Kansas City, you're going to stuff the box. What do the Eagles have to do to counter that to free up Barkley and have him get 100 yards? Because I think you're going to need that for them to win.
I think they have to have Jalen Hurts step up on the first drive or two and make a few big throws on 15 to 20-yard digs, outs, stuff like that to where, and this is truthfully, this is why Kansas City is so good over the years of Coach Spags being their DC, and even before him,
So
Coach
good.
Sutton is. Even if even if Hurts hits those passes, that would most likely open it against most defenses. I don't think the Chiefs will budge. I think the Chiefs will say, okay, go ahead. You beat us twice. You're going to have to do that 6 more times today. Most teams back off and say, oh my God, he completed passes. I think in the end, Philly's O-line is going to have to play the best game of the season and open holes against a box that's going to be too many men for them. If they do the best job they've done all season blocking and can open holes, I think they have a chance. I don't think the Chiefs are going to get beat by Hurts because they're just not going to allow it to happen.
It's interesting because you look at the Eagles, and that passing game should be a lot more dynamic than it has been this year. They haven't had to. Saquon Barkley has had an MVP season. He's a stud. But you have Antonio Brown. You have Devontae Smith. Not Antonio Brown, A.J. Brown. Sorry about that. Who are dynamite. I mean, those are 2 of the best receivers in the league. So this passing game should be open if they allow it. The question comes into Jalen Hurts. He's really been hit or miss this year. What can the Chiefs do to really expose that inconsistency with Jalen Hurts?
Well, you want to make the throws hard. You don't want to give him anything short and easy, the quick hitting throws. The quick hitting throws are what let you build confidence, let you get comfortable, and then you can start making tougher throws. If I were the Chiefs, and like I said, I am far from a coach. I am nowhere near an X's nose guy. But to me, I would squeeze in. I want my everything corners. I want them inside the receivers. I want everything pushed outside. So I have to make Hurts. He can't throw darts through us. He's going to have to put it over us. So that's what I'm doing. I'm making it hard. If Hurts wants to do well, he's to me is going to have to be really accurate early, and he's going to have to make some throws he hasn't consistently made this year. The intermediate and deep throws on with power as opposed to touch.
Okay. So you broke the game down. What are you going to, what's your pick?
I think Kansas City will win.
Ugh.
Um, I think they will win. I don't think it will be a blowout. I don't think it will be a shootout. I think it will be a close game, but I think in the end, and it's not due to lack of coaching or anything like that. I just think Kansas City's got a little bit more talent at certain positions. And Patrick is Patrick. The guy's a remarkable quarterback. And his combination with Andy Reid, it's a rare pairing. I think they'll find a way to win.
Now the question is how many questionable calls are going to be made during this game in the favor of the Chiefs? You don't have to answer that. Couple more things have been announced. What's that?
You know what I'm going to hate about that? If he wins, he's going to get the whole thing about the first ever to win 3 in a row.
Yep.
Bright Star won 3 in a row in the 60s.
He didn't. There wasn't a Super Bowl.
It was all they had.
I understand that, but the Browns won 5 in a row in the AFL championship. What's your point? I'm with you. I'm a Packers
won
fan.
3 in a row.
Didn't win 3 Super Bowls in a row. They would have if it existed, but it didn't. So it doesn't count. Couple more big things have happened, and this is something I haven't seen before. Of course, we have the Myles Garrett demanding a trade, and I want to talk about that, but this one specifically is weird to me. Cooper Kupp was told by the Rams he's being shopped, and on Instagram, he came out and announced this, but said he doesn't want to be traded. He wants to finish his career with the Rams. That was his plan. So I guess my question to you here is, have you ever seen this happen with a player before with actual desire to stay, but they tell him, listen, we're trading you no matter what? And then what is his value going to be in a trade market like this? And does Kupp have any leverage?
I mean, has it happened before? Yeah, there have been players who have told the team, I don't want to be traded, but the team's like, hey, we philosophically believe this is the direction we're going to go in. They may not have come out and said it publicly, but it's definitely happened.
Sure, I'm just surprised it came out like this. Normally
Well,
it's
I
like the
think he's
trade
upset.
happens, then they announce it.
Well, I think he's upset. And I think, and this is the thing is, remember, Kupp has no leverage in reality. Like the team can do what it wants because if they trade him to, say they trade him to Carolina, who was awful this year.
Yeah.
Is Kupp going to stay away and not get paid? No. They know he'll show up. I mean, is it possible? Yeah, but the odds are he's going to show up.
Yeah.
Just like your old quarterback there. If the new Jets people say, hey, Aaron, you're going to be the backup this year, no matter what, guess what? He ain't walking away. He can say all he wants and chirp all he wants, but 40 or 50 or 60 million, he'll be there to carry a clipboard.
Mm-hmm.
So Kupp's only leverage, and I think he's trying to get it out there publicly to sort of make it even more of an issue, is say, hey, any team that takes me, yeah, I might not be the best guy in your locker room. I might be a little bit of a headache because I don't want to be there. And maybe that gets teams that are interested to either A, back off and say, nah, we don't want to do this. Or maybe he's doing it as a way to say, hey, if I'm going to get traded to a team, I don't want them giving up much to get me because I want to go to a team that's got a chance to win.
Well, okay.
So instead of a team offering a third or fourth, I want them to offer a conditional seventh.
He's had injury problems. I think he's been 9, 12, and 12 the last 2 years in games he's played. Where do you see him going? He's going to be probably a good number 2. Would I like to see him in Green Bay? Sure. I think he'd be a great fit for the Packers.
You want every player to come to Green Bay.
I do, because I want them to win, but I want guys who know how to run routes. But Cooper Kupp, where do you see him fitting in? Because he would be a great addition to a lot of different teams.
I do. I honestly think one of the places he'd be a really good fit is staying in the same stadium.
Oh,
the Chargers.
Yeah.
They lost Keenan Allen. Now, he was never as good as Keenan, but he's along the same lines of a bigger kid, runs very strong routes, great hands, be a perfect fit, go into that offense that needs receivers. So that, to me, jumps out as one of the big ones. The other place I think would be a great fit is bring him to Oakland. I mean, you talk about, Las Vegas. Bring him to Vegas. I mean, there is nobody that is going to get players to tough it out, play through little dings and stuff like that more than Coach Carroll. And you bring him there and Coach Carroll's enthusiasm, I think Kupp would be also not only good under Carroll, but imagine if you have to bring in a young quarterback. What better to have than Mr. Consistent in terms of routes, hands, all that. Perfect guy to roll into that building.
Well, especially if you bring in look what he did with Puka Nacua. Like, he didn't make that jump on his own. It had a lot to do with Cooper Cup being in that building.
There's no doubt. No, I mean, to me, he's a great guy to go after. You just have to be careful if you're a team. You don't want to give up much in the trade, and you definitely, I know he has a contract, but he's probably going to want some type of renegotiation. You can't overpay this kid. He's been dinged up for 3 straight
Right.
years. So if you can get him at a value for 6 million for 3 years, maybe give him 5 or 6 million a year for 3 years, that's a great value if
Mhm.
you can figure out a way to do it. Or does he force them? And basically, this is part of what he did is does he put the Rams in a position where they just end up cutting him because there's no trade market, and then Cooper can then go pick where he wants to play because teams are scared off that he might be an unhappy locker room guy.
See, and this is the weird thing for me with the Rams is because we're saying all these things about Cooper Cup that is very, very true, right? And you have a guy that wants to stay in LA, which means he would restructure his contract. And you have a quarterback. Listen, Matt Stafford's not going to last forever. It's coming to the end of the career. You are very much in win now mode. I just don't understand why you would give up an asset like that to move on. It's not like you have Puka Nakua, and that's really all you had last year. Like, you got nothing else.
Yeah, it's a strange situation. I think part of it may be that the Rams have had obviously some issues at other positions. The O line has really struggled with consistency in recent years. I think they may be going out there to try to spend a little money in free agency, and they would like to have both space on the roster and potentially finding a way to get some, although it's going to be a cap hit, space for the future. Maybe if they want to sign a guy to a big money deal this year, he takes less, but gets a signing bonus, and they can percolate that out over more years and they feel comfortable with that. That's just a guess. I've not spoken to anybody at the Rams to get a
Sure.
feel for that. I'm just sort of thinking that they're ready to move on. He's a receiver. They don't think he's ever going to get back to what he was. They don't want him there to pay him any type of money.
So before we get to the big news of the day with Miles Garrett, I want to ask you about a guy like Sam Darnold, who had an atrocious last couple games. Probably cost, and the Vikings have said you're not coming back. Where do you see him ending up, and what kind of money do you think he lost in those last couple games?
I mean, I don't know if he lost. I mean, he lost money. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say it's all peachy keen, but I will say most people I've spoken to look at it and say, "Hey, yeah, did he play poorly? Yes, but was he under fire in terms of constant pressure? Those last two games, 100%. I think some of the problems with their O line showed up in those final few games as they were playing some better teams. Um, I think you're looking at a contract similar to Baker, maybe that 25 to 35 million sort of prove it contract. And I mean, if you're a team that's got a pretty good team but doesn't have that guy, he's still only, I think he'll be 28 next season.
Yeah, he's
Is
not
he
old.
a guy, right? I mean, is he a guy you bring in and say, let's see what you can do? Let's give this guy a chance. To me, I could see a team, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but a team like a Giants, who obviously they need a quarterback, but here's a veteran guy who is willing to be in front of a rookie, not complain, do his job. That's one spot I could see him going. Um,
I've got to live
th-
with the guy who's been saying that for the last several
I, I'm
weeks.
I'm not saying that's the ideal spot,
No,
but
you
I think,
did. It's okay. It's
but I could see him going to any of these teams, whether it's the Raiders, any of these teams, Tennessee, where they're going to try to develop a young quarterback and bring him in and say, hey, this is a guy that can get us through a year or two. I also think there's some teams that might say, hey, we don't know if the guy we have is the guy, or we know our guy isn't the guy. Like, what if the Jets regime says we don't want anything to do with Rodgers? Would Darnold come in, give you a guy for a few years you feel comfortable with, and you draft a guy this year or next year to develop? So,
going back to the Jets would be very, very interesting. That would be the first
very
time I've ever
interesting.
seen
It'd be
that.
awesome for the media.
It,
Oh,
it
yeah.
it would be great. Another thing that has been awesome for the media is Miles Garrett coming out and demanding a trade. Now, here's where I don't think this is necessarily real because he is going into the last 2 years of his contract, which are all non-guaranteed. So we've seen this. We saw this with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk the last few years, where they're demanding trades, and all of a sudden they get paid and they're happy. But Miles Garrett, throughout his career, has made it clear that he wants to win. So is this just saying, hey, I want to be the highest paid defensive player in the league? Or is he actually looking to get out, do you think?
I mean, I think if you gave him a choice and he actually had the ability to choose what he wanted, I think he'd go. I think he would like to be somewhere else where he could win. But the reality is he has literally zero leverage because they have him under contract for 2 more years. If he isn't the best defensive player in the league, he's one of the top 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
there's no chance the Browns are going to let him go because the reality is, no matter how much do we want to say, oh, the owner decided not to make changes, he believes in the coach, which I do too. I think Kevin is a phenomenal coach in Cleveland, and he believes in the front office. Hey, if they miss the playoffs again next year, the coach may survive, but there's no way the front office is surviving. So would they be smart to say, oh, yeah, Miles wants out. Let's give him up. We'll get 2 first-round picks this year and next year. Well, the odds are this year's first-round pick, only 25% of them make an impact. Usually it's the second or third year. So the odds are you're going to say, okay, we're going to make our defense, which was not great this year, worse in 2025. And we still don't know who our quarterback is, but we're going to expect to win and keep our jobs? No. Miles Garrett can scream all he wants. The odds of them trading him are, I would say, well below 10%. And I would say if they're going to, it's going to be 3 first-rounders and some players because you're going to have to blow their doors off for
Right.
them to make the trade. And I don't think they're going to. I'd be stunned if they traded him.
I would think they'd be foolish if they traded him. He is that good and that much of a difference maker. I mean, the big news around listening to Milwaukee media is, wouldn't he be great on the Packers? Of course he would.
He'd be
Of course
great
he
on
would.
any team.
You noticed every player would be great with the Packers.
He would.
It's-
Garrett especially, but he'd be great in the Chicago with the Bears. He'd be great in Philadelphia. He'd be great no matter where he went because he's the, if not the best, one of the top 2 or 3 edge rushers in the
Yep.
league.
Oh, I think he's the best defense player we've seen in a long time.
You want to know how you solve it if you're the Browns? It's real easy. You sit down and talk with them and say, hey, we know you want to win. We do too. We know you don't want to stay here long term. We're going to give you a little more money, but we're telling you right now that if by the midway point of the season it's clear we're not a playoff team, we will trade you during the season.
Wow.
Then he says, all right, you know what? I'm going to shut my mouth. I'm going to buy in and do whatever needs to be done. And then from there, he busts his butt all the season. And if you guys are great and make the playoffs, awesome. And if they don't, they trade him and he goes on for the final year and a half of his contract with another team.
I can't imagine him playing without an extension of some sort this year. I mean, I really think this has more to do with the ending of his contract not being guaranteed, but I could be wrong. I like Myles Garrett a lot, and I do think he wants to win. What do you do with the Browns now, though? Like, what could you tell them? Like, yeah, they went out and got Deshaun Watson, and that's what got him to sign that big contract to begin with. It's like, okay, you're dedicated to winning, but Deshaun Watson just tore his Achilles for a second time. I mean, that's been
he's done with the team. I mean,
wreck.
he'll be there this year on injured reserve because the money's guaranteed and he's hurt, so they'll keep him. They have to find another quarterback.
Yeah, they
That's just
do.
it.
And
You
I
have
think
to
they'll
do
keep
something.
him. I'd be surprised to see him on a sideline. I think they're going to be like, listen, you're on IR. Go.
Yeah, well, they're
away
going to exactly. They'll put him on IR so he doesn't have to be on the sideline, and they'll try to avoid having him be a distraction. But they have to find somebody because if they don't, they're all going to be out of work soon.
Yeah, and you have Jerry Jeudy there, who had a great year last year. You got a lot of good
Yep.
players on that roster. It's really just been a team that's a quarterback away. Could that be a dark horse for, say, an Aaron Rodgers or even a Sam Darnold? Maybe. I think he's more likely Giants or Pittsburgh bound. But an Aaron Rodgers in Cleveland could make that team very interesting.
100%. I don't know if that's the way they want to go. I think they would prefer if they're going to go get a quarterback that it be somebody younger. But a Darnold could be a guy that could fit there. I mean, a Darnold could be a guy that could fit there short term. Supposedly, their eyes are all over Kirk Cousins. That's sort of the guy that I've heard rumors of that's where they want to go. And it's going to be between them and the Giants to see who gets him.
I forgot about Kirk Cousins. I really did. I keep forgetting because he's with Atlanta, and I forget like they've moved on from him.
Yep, he is done there.
What do you think Pete Carroll's going to do in Vegas for a quarterback?
I think he'll be in the bidding for one of those two potentially.
Okay.
And I think if he doesn't get one of those two, I think he may look at a more middle of the road. But they're going to draft a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt in my mind.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about Russell Wilson. Where do you think he's going to end up? He's going to stay in Pittsburgh, or is he almost done?
That's a really great question. I think it's Pittsburgh or nowhere. I think a lot of people saw what a limited offense they ran this year to keep him productive, and it wasn't very good. And I think they look at it and say, can this guy be good enough if we're going to open things up and throw the ball 35 times a game? I don't know. I'd be surprised if another team, maybe if they don't have to pay him, if he signs for 10 million to compete for a starting job, but I don't think another team is going to commit that this is our guy. We're giving him 25 or 30 million and boom.
Well,
I just go ahead.
no, I was going to say you have a guy
Oh,
who's a head coach that has won a Super Bowl with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, but remember, he's also the one who was there when they shipped out Russell.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
not
think,
gonna happen.
and hey, I'm sure Pete in his heart of hearts loves the guy, but I think Pete also is a smart enough football person that realizes that Russell's on the back nine of his career, that to have a run first offense in the NFL and win today, you have to have rare talent.
Yeah.
You have to have the offensive line, the elite running back. So you have teams like the Ravens, who obviously have done it very well, the Eagles, who have done it well. Not many other teams are winning when the run first is their thing, unless they have tons of. And Russell, to me, is not at that level. And the Raiders, obviously, overall talent is not at that level to say we're going to win running the ball 35 times a game.
Did you hear anything about Mike McCarthy and why he backed out of the New Orleans thing and what
Well,
ultimate?
not only Mike McCarthy, Cliff Kingsbury
Sure.
backed out of it, and there was another coach I can't think of right now that also said no to the Saints.
Well, I think McCarthy, especially, I think he was told, hey, we're going with Kellen Moore. So I think in his eyes, the best thing at that point was, I don't want it to publicly be out there. I missed out on another job. I'm going to take a step back. I think Kingsbury, in all honesty, I think he is, and this is just a guess. I haven't asked anybody in Arizona, but I think he's enjoying, or in Washington, excuse me. I think he's enjoying the success after all the stuff that went on in Arizona and all the bad PR about you've never had a winning season, regardless of or never been to the playoffs, regardless of all these great quarterbacks you've coached in college and the pros. I think he's sort of like, hey, what do I have to do? Where can I improve so that I can win the next time I get that opportunity? Remember, it's not always, some guys end up saying, you know what, being the OC or DC is a better gig. Chip Kelly may be the best hire this whole offseason.
I don't want to talk about that. I am still very upset at Chip Kelly for leaving my
But
national
think about
championship
why. But
Buckeyes.
think about why he's going, right?
Yes, 100%.
Highest,
I completely
highest
respect
paid
it.
coordinator, and 2 years from now, if Pete decides to hang him up and they're winning, Chip's the new head coach of the Raiders.
Yeah, I get it.
So
It makes perfect sense for him. I'm happy for him. I don't have to like it. I can
no,
be
you don't
upset.
have to like it.
I
I will
love it.
say Pete Carroll and Brian Schottenheimer may end up being two of the sleeper hires of this coaching group that aren't getting talked about enough.
Schottenheimer's an interesting one. I mean, I didn't like where Jerry Jones was like, I'm out of my comfort zone. It's like, no, this is completely in your comfort zone.
Yeah.
This is somebody who is in your building. Like, you didn't do anything different than you did with Garrett
Jason
all those
Garrett or
years
any,
ago.
yep,
Like,
100%.
this is right. In fact, Mike McCarthy was the one outside your comfort zone.
Yes. No, I think, and the reason I like it is, and given I'm biased, I worked with Brian at the Rams, so I know a little bit about him, but I think he is much better as a head coach than he is a coordinator.
Really?
Because to me, Brian's strength is he is a natural leader. When you're around this guy, he's got that it, that ability to relate to any player at any time and motivate them. I think he'll be very good at that. He doesn't have to worry about doing all the game planning and doing all that minutia. He can, even though he's going to call plays, he can oversee and lead. And I think he's going to be very good at that. He's a guy who is very smart, knows ball, can lead, but he doesn't have an ego. And that's one of the great traits of people that are very successful. And that I was around it with Coach Vermeil, and I think that's why
Mhm.
Coach liked Coach Schottenheimer is he is a natural leader, but he doesn't have that big ego.
Wow. All right. Now for the silly question.
Okay.
Bill Belichick came out and wants to change the name of the Lombardi Trophy to the Brady Trophy. What was behind that? Why would he say something so stupid?
Well, and I don't know when exactly it was said, what the date was. Um, I think I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it had been floated or he had floated it like publicly or privately even to try to get the Raiders to consider him for that job before they hire Pete Carroll. Because I don't have any question that Bill, in my mind, wants to be in the NFL.
Yes.
There's no doubt in my mind, 100%, he wants to be an NFL head coach again. The fact that Brady didn't bring him in screams that this may not happen ever. And I think he was trying to sort of lob a ball, saying, "Hey, you got to take care of me. I'm trying to take care of you." So
That
it's
makes
a
more
very
sense.
odd situation.
That makes more sense than anything else because you don't change and you don't forget your history
No,
with something like that. Should Brady be the name of the MVP trophy or the quarterback of the year trophy? Absolutely.
yeah,
But
Well, and the issue
Hey.
is too is there's a 10 million buyout at UNC, and the Raiders right now are paying $43 million for head coaches this year.
yeah. And let's also remember, they bring in Pete Carroll, who's 73.
Mhm.
So say in 2 years it's not gone well. Tom's still going to be the minority owner, and Bill will have a $1 million buyout. And all of a sudden, now he comes to the Raiders, and all things maybe work out. I don't think that's going to happen because I think Coach Carroll's going to win.
Yeah.
I do
If that
too.
guy wins, but that could be part of this whole thing. You never know.
I just think, I hate to say this, but I think the game has passed Belichick by a little bit. Not on field coaching, but with some of his personnel decisions that he made the last few years in New England. I don't
Well,
know
he
if
was never, I don't think he was ever a good GM. I
That's
think
true.
he was an average GM drafting. He was very good at finding veteran free agents.
Yes.
He did a great job of guys like Vrabel and Teddy Bruschi and guys
Right.
like that and fitting them in. But his drafting, they had a lot of whiffs over the years. But when you have a Hall of Fame quarterback, you can miss on a lot of picks.
Right.
So that's where he made up for it. So I think he's one of the top three coaches of all time, at least in my lifetime. But will he ever coach the NFL again? I have no idea, but I think he definitely wants to.
I think he wants to too, but I don't see it at this point when he's had so many teams that could have grabbed him.
Yep,
he didn't
it's
get
very
the-
strange.
When he didn't get the Atlanta job, I thought, oh, this doesn't look good.
No, it
Yep.
looks really bad.
Well,
Yeah.
I hope he wins at UNC. Russ, thank you so much for joining us as always. Thank
Of
you.
course, guys. Thank you so much. I had a great time chatting. I love talking ball, and we didn't even have to talk about the best quarterback above Mahomes in your guy Jordan Love. I mean, we know you have him the number one quarterback of all time.
I mean, he's
So-
a Hall of Famer, but he needs a better coach in order to see that type of success. We'll see what happens.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay,
We're gonna have
All
you
right,
on
I'll try to
before-
remember that.
We're going to have you on before the draft, and that will be a question because I'm not real thrilled with LaFleur at times, just with his in-game changes.
Well, I will say this: I've done Shadur Sanders. I'm about finished with Cam Ward, and I'm going to do hopefully the 8 or 9 next quarterbacks, so I can have a good feel when I discuss these quarterbacks and not sound like an idiot.
Perfect. Well, I'm excited to hear that you also agree that Will Howard should be a first-round pick, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
That's
another
amazing. That
Ohio State-
Ohio State love is a little bit crazy.
It's insane. I have to live with it all the time, and Will Howard's going to be another Ohio State quarterback.
Like CJ Stroud, I completely agree.
Yeah, how'd CJ look this year? Anyways,
Sophomore slump.
Russ, we appreciate you coming by.
Thanks,
You
Russ.
got it, guys. Thanks a ton for having me.
Will Howard's going to be a great NFL quarterback. I don't know why people aren't seeing that. Pat McAfee is praising his
Of
name.
course he is.
And if the great Pat McAfee agrees with me, then I can never be wrong.
Right. I'm going to bet on the side of the track record of Ohio State quarterbacks. You're 1 in 100,000 so
Yes.
far.
Justin Fields is an NFL quarterback.
He's a backup. He
Is he in the NFL? Then he is an NFL quarterback. CJ Stroud, NFL quarterback.
and
Joe Burrow
is an LSU quarterback.
and is an Ohio State
No, he's
NFL
not.
quarterback.
By the way,
Clint Ewers is about to be drafted in the NFL. Ohio State
by
quarterback.
the way, Russ Landy, while I love him coming on the show, is as good as Mel Kiper. I'll say that now, and anybody wants to fight me on it, go ahead.
Oh, 100%.
Russ knows. I can't wait for when we bring him on to talk about the draft because he will know everybody.
Yeah, and he didn't say Will Howard wasn't the answer. He said he hadn't done his scouting on him yet.
Whatever.
So it's not over yet.
Well, we'll have a conversation with him later.
We will. You and I have had a great show, but as you all know, you cannot have a conversation with your dad without your father getting the last word. So it is all you.
So you want to know what the difference is between good NFL franchises and bad NFL franchises? Take a look at the number of coaches you've had in the last few years. Let's take a look at the Raiders. They're not paying just one head coach. They're paying 4 of them because the owner gets a little upset and fires them and then they have to pay him afterwards. If you're an NFL franchise, take your time and hire somebody good. Take a look at Dallas. We just had Russ on, and he was talking about how he thinks Schottenheimer is going to be a really good head coach, and I hope he is. But they give their coaches time before they move on to another one. You look at the Bears. How many head coaches have they went through, and how many quarterbacks have they went through over the years? When you're a good franchise, you make the right hires at the right time. And you don't just bail on somebody because they haven't done something in 1 year. Antonio Pierce got fired after 1 season. He should have had a chance to do it again. I look at the Packers back in the day. They were a one and done with one of their coaches, and it was probably the biggest mistake Ron Wolf ever made. So, NFL coaches, heed my advice. Give your coaches a chance.
Thank you, as always, so much for watching. This has been Sports Talk with Dad. See you next time.
Bye, everybody.